2019 is drawing to a close, and since we've brought you each Premier League club's best moment of the year, it only seems right that we look at their worst moment as well. Arsenal losing the Europa League final. 2019 has been a bad year for Arsenal. Particularly in the last few months, things have desperately unravelled. But would it all have been different if they'd won the Europa League? Unai Emery's side took on Chelsea in the final, knowing a win would allow them to sneak back into the Champions League via the back door. That could have given the club the lift they needed in the post-Arsene Wenger era. There might have been more money to spend, the winning mentality of old might have come back. But no, they lost 4-1 in Azerbaijan, unable to stop Chelsea winning the trophy. Aston Villa losing to West Brom at home. While they might be a Premier League team now, that didn't look likely back in February. Dean Smith's side had just suffered back-to-back defeats, one of which really hurt supporters. They welcomed rivals West Brom to Villa Park, but they were beaten 2-0 in their own backyard, a result which a lot of fans thought doomed them to another season of Championship football. The mood was terrible in Villa Park, but they managed to bounce back, going on a sublime run after that defeat to reach the playoffs and win promotion, beating the Baggies over two legs in the process for redemption. Bournemouth signing Dominic Solanke. It was right at the start of 2019, but this has to go as Bournemouth's worst moment of the year. The Cherries inexplicably paid £19 million for Dominic Solanke, a striker who had struggled to make an impression at Liverpool following his move from Chelsea. And at Dean Court he's been just as bad, unable to score goals at the rate he did as a youth player. The fee Bournemouth paid was ridiculous, as Solanke had done nothing to justify it. Liverpool probably couldn't believe their luck when Eddie Howe turned up with £90 million worth of cash to take Solanke off their hands. Because I imagine that's how transfers work. Brighton sacking Chris Hughton. While Brighton have done well since Chris Hughton left the Amex, the Seagulls' decision to sack him was certainly a hard one to take. Hughton had been brilliant on the south coast, guiding them to promotion, then competing in the top flight and holding their own. Last season was their toughest yet, but Hughton was still able to keep them up, which made the decision to sack him all the more shocking. In hindsight it was the right decision, but it was certainly a low moment for Brighton in 2019. Burnley losing to Sunderland in the EFL Cup. Burnley are a solid team. They get by, beat the teams around them and play the way they want. So there were rarely many huge lows at Turf Moor, but the loss to Sunderland earlier this season must have been slightly embarrassing. This isn't the Sunderland team of a few years ago, this was a third tier side who were in disarray, seemingly slipping further and further away from the top each passing day. Yet they were able to beat Burnley at Turf Moor in the League Cup, ending Sean Dyche's hopes of a cup run early on. Chelsea, Eden Hazard leaving. It had been coming for a while, but that doesn't make Eden Hazard leaving Chelsea any easier to take for the Blue fans. For years the Belgian had been the standard bearer in the Premier League, the division's best player, capable of doing things with the football that others couldn't even imagine. From sublime solo runs to stunning goals, incredible balance to the joy of being fouled, Eden Hazard lived up to his immeasurable hype in the Premier League, and it's a worse place without him. Chelsea are coping, but you know most people associated with the club will wish he was still their player, including Frank Lampard. Crystal Palace the FA Cup quarter-final loss. This was a bad week for Palace. First they lost 2-1 to their weird rivals Brighton in the Premier League, then a week later they missed out on a place in the FA Cup semi-finals despite getting a decent draw to the quarters. Palace faced Watford at Vicarage Road, but were unable to seal their place in the final four, instead losing 2-1 to allow Watford to advance to Wembley. For a club like Palace, this was a golden opportunity to go the distance in a domestic cup, but it was an opportunity that passed them by. Everton losing 5-2 to Liverpool. This was a difficult one, as Everton haven't had a good year. The injury to Andre Gomes was a horrendous moment, but we can't look past the battering they got at Anfield the other week. Liverpool put out a weakened team, but they still breezed past a desperate Everton side, unable to deal with Liverpool's pace and power. The defeat put Marco Silva on the brink, probably the only positive of the evening, but left Everton in the bottom three, 20 derbies without a win, and no win at Anfield since 1999. And if Liverpool had been a bit more ruthless, it could have been an even heavier defeat. Leicester City losing to Newport in the FA Cup. While the Brendan Rodgers era has been nothing short of sensational, 2019 started with the end of Claude Puel and things were getting ugly. The Foxes faced a daunting away trip in the third round, heading to Newport County, who really fancied a giant killing. And that's exactly what happened, netting an 85th minute penalty to win the game 2-1, as the League Two outfit knocked out the former Premier League winners. Rodney Parade was rocking, while Claude Puel was a dead man walking. Liverpool losing the Premier League title on the final day. As good as Liverpool were last season, they weren't better than Manchester City in the Premier League. They took it at the final day, but it was something of a foregone conclusion with Guardiola's men up against a poor Brighton team. The Seagulls did go ahead through Glen Murray, but City quickly hit back, meaning Liverpool were only mathematically top for a couple of minutes. The Reds were powerless to stop City, ending the day in second place despite an incredible points tally that would have won you a league 9 times out of 10. Manchester City, the disallowed goal versus Tottenham in the Champions League. Man City and VAR don't really get on. Had it not been for the technology, they'd have been in last season's Champions League semi-final. Raheem Sterling thought he'd won it. The Etihad erupted. Guardiola was up and down the touchline. It was Aguero versus QPR all over again. But VAR took a look, realising Aguero's foot was offside in the build-up, and the goal was ruled out, meaning instead it was Tottenham who advanced, as City's European heartache continued for at least another year. Manchester United losing 4-0 to Everton. One quality you always see at Manchester United is fighting until the end, never giving up, but that didn't happen at Goodison Park in April. Solskjaer's team still had a chance of reaching the Champions League again, but those hopes pretty much vanished with this crushing defeat. And it's not like it was a good Everton team, this was Marco Silva's side, but the Red Devils were desperate out there, leading to a very angry rant from Mr Gary Neville. Newcastle United, Rafa Benitez leaving. Nothing has hurt Newcastle more in 2019 than seeing Rafa Benitez leave St James's Park. The Spaniard was the only ray of hope on Tyneside, having enjoyed 3 brilliant years in the dugout against the odds, battling with Mike Ashley at every turn. But terms couldn't be agreed on a new deal, and Benitez walked away. The club didn't share his vision, so he took his talents to China. Meanwhile, Newcastle settled for Steve Bruce, a man who had a cabbage thrown at him during his time as Villa boss. It'd be like spending 3 years in a relationship with Mila Kunis, then one day you're suddenly stuck in bed with the Elephant Man. Norwich City losing 5-1 to Aston Villa. While Norwich may have beaten Man City at home this season, they also got absolutely battered by Aston Villa. After 83 minutes they were 5-0 down to Dean Smith's side, which isn't a good look considering both teams had just been promoted to the top flight. To get turned over like that was pretty bad for Norwich, and it acted as a harsh reminder that they are in a real battle to stay in the Premier League this season. Oh well, at least Dermot got a goal back for them. Sheffield United missing out on the title to Norwich. It says a lot about Sheffield United 2019 that this is their worst moment. Sure, they got knocked out of cup competitions, but they won't really care. 2019 was about returning to the Premier League, and they did that by coming second in the Championship. But they could have won the title had things gone their way on the final day. The Blades needed a better Norwich's result at Villa, but the Canaries were able to win, while Sheffield United had to come from behind a draw at Stoke, meaning they finished second. In reality though, they won't care. Southampton losing 9-0 to Leicester. I mean, it couldn't be anything else, could it? This was an embarrassing night for Southampton Football Club. They conceded 9 goals at home to Leicester without reply, suffering the biggest home defeat in the history of the Football League. They had a man sent off early, it was chucking it down with rain, it was a Friday night, and it was live on the telly for everyone to see. Amazingly, Ralph Hasenhüttl wasn't sacked as soon as the full-time whistle blew. Tottenham losing the Champions League final. While the departure of Mauricio Pochettino probably hurt the most, that might not have happened had they won the Champions League final in Madrid. But in what was an awful game, Tottenham failed to really make their mark, swept aside by a resolute and clinical Liverpool team who would win their 6th European Cup. A trophy would have been richly deserved for Pochettino, but it wasn't to be, and from there it went from bad to worse as he eventually succumbed to the sack from Daniel Levy, turning to Jose Mourinho to save Tottenham's season. Watford losing the FA Cup final. Reaching the FA Cup final was huge for Watford, but after what happened in the game, they probably wish they hadn't bothered. Manchester City were merciless against the Hornets, completing the domestic treble in style by winning 6-0, the biggest FA Cup final win since 1903 when Bury beat Derby. Some of the City players even looked embarrassed to win by such a scoreline, it wasn't even a contest at times. But Man City were out there to do a job, and proved they were the absolute best in England last season. West Ham the 4-0 cup defeat to Oxford United. Giant killings can happen, pretty much every club has been knocked out of a cup by a team from a lower division, but this was really embarrassing for West Ham. It's not like they narrowly lost, they got battered by League One side Oxford United, losing 4-0 in the Carabao Cup. And it wasn't a massively weak Hammer side, there was only one youth player in the starting 11. This was a strong team, a team that should have breezed past Oxford, but no, they suffered a huge defeat and one that turned a lot of fans against Manuel Pellegrini. Wolves the FA Cup semi-final defeat. Wolves enjoyed a brilliant return in the Premier League last season, playing brilliant football and qualifying for the Europa League. The one thing that would have made it better was an FA Cup final appearance, and they were seconds away from it until Troy Deeney scored a 94th minute penalty to take the semi-final to extra time. From there, Watford went on to win it, earning the right to get battered off City in the final. So that's every Premier League club's worst moment of 2019. Let us know what your club's is in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And from all of us at HITC, have a happy new year and all the best for 2020.